From national security to global corruption, you're with Scott Wheeler and Through the Looking Glass on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
Hello and welcome to Through the Looking Glass on TNT Radio. I'm Scott Wheeler. And you're going to hear about President Biden's speech on Thursday night in Philadelphia. We're also going to have author and essayist Oleg Atbashian to provide us with some color commentary about what's taking place now. Oleg is an immigrant from the former Soviet Union, and he has some brilliant insights, as always. Oleg, what is your opinion? You know what's taking place in the country right now, a great split, and you've got one side attempting to impose its will on the other while calling those who just want to be left alone fascists.
Well, let's start with the good news, because now across America, all the violent domestic terrorists enjoy a long traditional Labor Day weekend, preparing to consume tubes of animal flesh they call hot dogs, cooked on global warmer devices using charcoal and dangerous lighter fluids. So that's the good news. The bad news is that we now have a surreal mix of Obama, Hitler, and Stalin in the White House that is giving us performances that in the popular culture can be compared to 1984, the Pink Floyd concert in Berlin, The Wall, its aesthetics with all the red and black, and the wall itself. And Emperor Palpatine's speech in Star Wars, which I never liked, but a lot of people on the left referred to all those things when Trump was president, and they were calling Trump all those things. Now, Trump never did anything that a dictator does, but now we have this Orwellian language where words mean not exactly what they used to mean before, because the left has redefined speech, and that's one of their weapons. So Biden likes to talk about our democracy a lot, but in that language, our democracy means our forthcoming dictatorship.
Redefining speech, and that's really what we have seen over the last 35 years maybe, but definitely over the past 15 years, redefining terms. What is racism, bigotry? And it's being redefined by people who really aren't qualified to do it, but are doing it for political reasons. Would you agree?
Whether it's equality, for example, when Biden talks about equality, he usually means creating classes of people who live at the expense of other people who work. But that's not the equality that our founding fathers had in mind, whom he invoked in a rather uncouth manner. He has no right to do that. The vision of how things work are very different among the traditional Americans, where individual effort is how you make your life and the country's life great, as opposed to the government creating structures that supposedly should help people to achieve their goals. But we know how that works when the government tries doing something. You know, if socialism is installed in the Sahara Desert, there will be a shortage of sand very soon. So now we quickly went from abundance in everything during the Trump years to shortages of everything and skyrocketing prices and inflation under Biden, even though he claims that we're going ahead like never before. So Biden was taking credit for everything Trump did, and basically he was saying in his speech, "Let's make America great again," without saying "Let's make America great again." He was basically plagiarizing a lot of things that Trump was saying while calling Trump the danger to democracy. And
and using that theme about promoting the idea of America and American ideals, while when Trump made those same kinds of speeches, he was attacked by the media and by Democrats for jingoism and being a nationalist. Biden actually sounded like a nationalist last night, didn't he? I mean, Thursday night.
National socialist, I might add.
Yeah, National Socialist. But capturing
Yeah,
the themes, as you point out, he was capturing the themes of being pro-America while destroying and dividing it.
when Trump tried to unite everybody, and he was plainly saying it in his speeches, how we all have the same blood running in our veins of the same color, regardless of the color of the skin, and that we all need to work and be judged by what we do. They still try to call Trump a divider, but when Biden is plainly dividing the nation and trying to pit one group against another, he is called the uniter, and he's calling to unite. It's like, who are we being friends against? That's the thing with socialism, that they always need an enemy. They always need some conflict to grow. They always need crisis. They cannot exist without crisis, because that's how their collectivist ideology thrives, on conflict. And that's, if there is none, they will create it. If there is no enemy, they will create the enemy. It was very darkly threatening, almost the entire speech. Well, apart from all the empty rhetoric that very much reminded the Obama speeches. I think it was either the same speechwriter or Obama helped, but a lot of this hopey and changey and dreamy stuff that we heard in Obama speeches was again present here, without any concrete details, without any indication of how all that can be achieved, except for just believe, and maybe that belief will help us get somewhere. But that's not how things work in the real world, and socialists don't understand this, otherwise they wouldn't be socialists.
Did you notice that the very media who used to ridicule Trump for being divisive were many of them were saying that this speech was needed, that Biden's dark and threatening tone was really warranted because of, formless threat that they keep referring to as the MAGA crowd. For the past 6 or 7 years, all we've seen is people with MAGA hats being assaulted. They look at the January 6th thing. We'll get into that a little bit in the next segment. But it's almost like we're in a bizarro world where up is down and down is up. And you were talking about their redefinition of language and of words.
That is what's scary, because that redefinition of language is happening with the help of the media. They are the active participants and oftentimes the authors of it. So when they support it, it's a clear collusion between the power and the press, and any dissenting voices are being silenced. And when I came to America from the former dictatorship, I was so happy that I would finally live in a free country ruled by reason and common sense. But now I see that it's sliding into the same kind of totalitarian dictatorship it's not quite there. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but there is enough reasons to be concerned, because it's sliding there. It's going in that direction and has been going for a long time. Trump has stopped that movement for a little bit, but it still continued under his rule, because you could see how the deep state was still doing everything it wanted in terms of setting up all these fake, allegedly grass movements like the BLM, Antifa, and the rest, creating riots, destroying statues, creating the Me Too movement, the cancel culture.
Let me jump in a second, Oleg, because we've got to take a break. But when we come back, we're going to explore some more of that. You're listening to TNT Radio Through the Looking Glass with Scott Wheeler. We are joined by brilliant author and essayist Oleg Atbashian, and we will take a short time out. We'll be right back after this.
Mask mandates don't work.
No.
We mandate that the truth be told.
Let's do it.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back to Through the Looking Glass on TNT Radio. We are on with Oleg Atbashian, author and essayist, a refugee of the former Soviet Union, and one of the brightest minds in describing what we're seeing as a culture, as we see this take over of our language, of our politics, and the spread of it. Oleg has been chronicling this for years through a couple of books that he's written. One is called Shakedown Socialism, which is a really, truly brilliant, very basic explanation of how socialism failed in the Soviet Union. He also is the author of Hotel USSR, and I recommend everyone get those books by going to atbashian.com. I've read them. They are brilliantly written, and Oleg also has a website that is highly satirical called The People's Cube. Many people, it's surprising, here in Washington, D.C., I run into frequently people in the intelligence community who talk about The People's Cube, and they don't even know Oleg. They just talk about how funny it is, how entertaining it is. And I say, well, I happen to know the guy who invented this concept. It's brilliant. And for that reason, he's also, not only is a legitimate cultural thinker and an intellectual, he's also considered by experts to be one of the most brilliant satirists in our nation right now. Oleg, going into the break, we were talking about the chaos and disruption that was caused from Trump's presidency from the beginning. And it started when Trump was being inaugurated. First of all, the Democrats were saying that it was an illegitimate election and that Trump was an illegitimate president based on a lie that was manufactured by the Democrat Party. And they used that. That's now illegal. You can't question the 2020 election. They were allowed to question the 2016 election. The duplicity is explosive. But I recall the day Trump was inaugurated, the riots outside of inauguration, where at least 7 police officers were injured, far more than the number that was injured on January 6th. The riots began, and they were nonstop, from Antifa, from BLM. You were talking about those groups. How do you see them? What do you see them doing, and what roles do those groups play? I call them Democrat Party militias.
They are the Democrat Party militia. Let's here define the terms, because when we say Democrat Party, we mean it has been hijacked at some point by a group of power-hungry, manipulative, cynical ideologues who are trying to remake America. Obama was a representative of them, but there was a whole gang behind him. So, Hillary in a way also, although she's too cynical to be an ideologue, she's probably just was playing along to get to power. So there are a lot of American Democrats, the common working people, who are traditionally Democrats and who still haven't figured out what really is going on. And they still support Biden, although I don't believe that all those 81 million votes that Biden claims he received came from real people. There is no way that could happen. So
yes, you draw a distinction between the rank and file Democrats. These were the labor union people, many of them, and a lot of them have been abandoning the Democrat Party. A lot of them in 2016 and 2020 voted for Trump because they remembered how the Clintons in 16, they remembered Hillary Clinton and her husband, how they abandoned them and sold out to China, their manufacturing jobs. There was the case of in Columbus, Ohio, of Plant 85, where the union, it was owned by McDonnell Douglas, which was struggling, and the China wanted to buy it, and McDonnell Douglas wanted to sell it to China. The labor union there wanted to buy the Plant 85 from McDonnell Douglas and run it themselves, and they were thwarted by the company. And then the Clintons allowed the transfer of these sophisticated machine tools that were ultimately used by China to make silkworm missiles. And the Clintons allowed that. The unions never really recovered from that, and they paid Hillary Clinton. That was one of the reasons Trump defeated her, I think, because in Ohio and Pennsylvania is where those unions were hit the worst by Clinton's policies. Right. But it is important, I agree, to separate the rank and file Democrats from the party leadership, which is the real corrupt part of the equation. Yes.
So the rank and file should abandon them as soon as possible. So when I say Democrats, I mean that corrupt leadership that is creating the narratives, including the media and the academia and the entertainment industry. But in any event, the Democrats have been projecting everything they were trying to do at the opposition, at the Republicans, at the conservatives first, and then they were doing it themselves. First of all, they planted the idea that these things are possible and that the other side is doing it, and then when they were doing it, it didn't seem as bad, because they've already planted the seeds of that this is already happening in people's minds. So that was still a little bit more or less not as explicit before Trump, but in the Trump years, it has become really an open strategy. First of all, they were claiming that Trump had stolen the election, that he was an illegitimate president, and then they went ahead and stole elections themselves. They claimed that Trump was a dictator, and then they went ahead and established a dictatorship, because this is what is happening. It is soft dictatorship yet, but it's getting harder and harder. They called Trump a divider. They have themselves divided the nation and are now pushing it to the brink of civil war, God forbid. And Biden talking about violence all the time and violent extremism is, I'm afraid, a projection of what they are planning to do. So everything they have been blaming us without any good reason for, they have been doing themselves in the past. So it is very possible that everything that Biden was warning about us, they are going to do themselves in the near future.
They have this propensity for violence, and we saw it in this, especially peaked in the summer of 2020, and it's almost like a threat on the one hand. On the other hand, did you see this speech as being provocative in an attempt to to provoke people to violence, to make people really angry?
Well, they did a lot of provocative things. Like he mentioned Charlottesville, which to me seems like a complete provocation because it was an aberration. Such things never happened before or after. It seemed like an operation that was orchestrated, performed, and then later covered by the Democrats. They've created the impression that America is full of racists and latter-day KKK that are supporting Trump, and that's who we are fighting against. From what I hear, if there are some radical groups that are not the Democrats, then perhaps at least half of their members are FBI informants or provocateurs. Sometimes there are 90% of them, like that group that allegedly planned to kidnap the Michigan governor. It turned out that it was all the FBI operation, and a couple of guys were just stupid enough to go along with those plans. Same thing I can say about Charlottesville and a lot of other things. And from what I hear, a lot of what happened in the Capitol on January 6th was also a provocation by special agents who were acting dressed as Trump supporters.
Special agents, but also Democrats cloaked as Trump supporters who were among the crowd. And we've been following this for a while. Something very strange. I was there covering the riots on January 6th, and it was not an insurrection. It was far from it. And in fact, what was much closer to an insurrection occurred in late May of 2020. And according to the Associated Press, Secret Service agents rushed President Donald Trump to the White House bunker on Friday night as hundreds of protesters gathered outside the executive mansion, some of them throwing rocks and tugging at police barricades. Well, it was a little worse than that. That was
exactly. That was an attempt to take over the White House. And when they were dispersed and the church was burnt, I think that was on the same day, right? And then
yes.
Trump went out and posed in front of that vandalized church with the Bible in his hands. The press portrayed him as a dictator, as a poser, and they forced General Milley to denounce Trump because General Milley was standing next to him. So that's when I lost all respect for General Milley, and I don't think that America's military is in good hands today. For that
yes,
reason.
where's the pressure on Secretary Austin or Milley, General Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, to excoriate President Biden for using two Marines as props in his very angry and dark speech Thursday night? We've heard nothing about this, really. I mean, other than this is completely normal, and this wasn't a political speech.
It was very fascistic. Biden called the conservatives or the MAGA Republicans like semi-fascists, but he was a full fascist in the speech on that stage with those fascist aesthetics with red and black colors of National Socialism and having the Marines standing behind him. There is a big chance that those Marines were the ones whom he described as these domestic terrorist extremists. He was talking about the military a lot, trying to pander to the military, but it is his administration that decimated the military with these mandatory COVID shots that were completely unnecessary to young, healthy people. But they've fired a lot of service members in the Marine Corps and other branches of the military. Some people that I know personally. So those shots were a test of compliance. Like, if you're not compliant, you don't belong here. And now he's pandering, saying how we are all together.
It's not just the shots that they were using decimate the military. They are forcing the military to inculcate transsexuals, and they are using budgets allocated to treat soldiers and sailors and airmen to instead train people how to integrate transsexuals into the military. This is actually taking place. It's not hot rhetoric or anything else. This is actually happening right now as we speak. And while our military is becoming degraded in its ability to defend the country and defend the citizens, you describe it as a fascistic speech, or Biden being fascistic in this speech, and I couldn't agree more. And you, who know, Oleg, know what fascism looks up close. You've seen it up close. You've been a victim of it, and you understand this better probably than almost any American does. And so your opinion on this is very, very important and carries a lot of weight. We're going to take a time out. When we come back, we'll have more with Oleg Atbashian, author and essayist. I'm Scott Wheeler on Through the Looking Glass, TNT Radio Network.
Lighting the fuse for freedom. This is TNT Radio.
Welcome back to Through the Looking Glass. I'm Scott Wheeler on TNT Radio. We have on the line with us Oleg Atbashian. He's an author and essayist. You can get his books at atbashian.com. That's at ATBASHIAN at bashian.com. And we have been discussing the current critical state of the United States and the very dark, aggressive speech that President Biden made on Thursday night. And what we've seen from the other side events, the attacks on Donald Trump, the Democrat organizations like the BLM and Antifa, John Brown Gun Club, there's a whole series of militias, Democrat militias out there creating violence, attacking federal buildings, attacking the White House. And all we hear is about an insurrection that occurred on January 6th, which was not an insurrection and very much a riot, but we don't know how many of the rioters were actually Trump supporters and how many of them were Democrats in disguise or even agents, federal agents, provocateurs. That is one of the bizarre things we're seeing. It's confused. You can't believe a word you read or hear from the media anymore. It's devastating to a lot of people who can't figure out what's true and what's not. Meanwhile, when they embrace conspiracy theories because it's all that's left, the media ridicules and chastises them for that. Your thoughts, Oleg?
The name of your program, Through the Looking Glass, is very apt because we are more and more living like in the world of that Alice visited, the Wonderland. That's where the title comes from. And it's completely absurd world that these socialists are creating. One of the Russian immigrants once wrote that the government, the authorities were lying to us, and we knew they were lying to us, and they knew that we knew they were lying, but they continued to lie, and we continued to pretend that we believe them. I wrote a joke, like a remake of a Soviet joke about markers of American socialism. America is capitalist and greedy, but half of the population is subsidized. And the half of the population is subsidized, but they still think they're victims. They think they're victims, but their representatives run the government. Their representatives run the government, but the poor keep getting poorer. The poor keep getting poorer, yet they have all the things that people in other countries can only dream about. And they have all the things that people in other countries can only dream about, and yet they want America to be more like those other countries.
Kind of a vicious circle, isn't it?
Yes, and that's where we're heading. Now, the markers of fascism. Fascism is a variety of socialism, so let's not separate it too much. The socialists have, the left has extended a lot of effort to convince everybody that fascism is a right-wing ideology, but it's not. It's very left-wing. Has always been. Mussolini, who created fascism, was a socialist. A diehard socialist, and he claimed he would never stop being a socialist. It was just a variety of socialism. The Nazis called themselves National Socialism. And one of the markers of that is, like Mussolini said, everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. That's the ideology of fascism, where state regulates everything. And the tool to achieve that goal is the one-party rule. And that's what the Democrats have been trying to achieve for a while. So if Biden is a uniter, he's a uniter in the same sense that Hitler was a uniter. Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer. Or Stalin was a uniter by claiming that we need to get rid of the enemies of the people. And they were looking for the enemies of the people, and then almost half of the country became enemies of the people, who were either imprisoned or shot or sent to labor camps and died there. Not many survived those camps. Things under socialism don't work. The economy malfunctions, things start breaking, and the reason for all that happening, of course, it's the wreckers, the enemies, the saboteurs. We need to find them. We need to find those extremists among us and denounce them and get rid of them. So the entire country needs to denounce and look for the enemies and report them to the authorities and become heroes for that. And in the Soviet Union, there were heroes that are being promoted who were good at denouncing. Even there was a boy called Pavlik Morozov who denounced his own family and ratted them to the police that they were hiding some grain that they didn't give to the government when the government came to collect their grain. His family was arrested, and that boy was claimed as a big hero. So that's the atmosphere in which socialism exists, and that's, I'm afraid, the atmosphere that Biden. Biden is just a puppet; he's a token. The people who stand behind him that are trying to impose here. I mean, it's not as stark as yet, but it's coming. The children are being brought up in schools in that kind of mindset where they need to watch their parents and denounce them and try to re-educate them because the children know better. That also was happening in China. You know, the young Red Guards who were doing the Cultural Revolution in the 60s in China. They were all the young people, the teenagers who were so self-righteous. The government gave them the license to attack their own teachers. So the children would put the teachers on their knees and would beat them and demand that they denounce and comply. Denounce their old ideals and comply with the new ideals of the Cultural Revolution. That was a very scary time, and this kind of mix of Maoism and Stalinism and Leninism and Hitlerism is coming here in America. I mean, we cannot define it as one particular brand. They're not copying it. They are kind of creatively developing all those brands that existed before them, and they are trying to implement them here as they go. Now, Biden, in his speech, mentioned that the conservatives are trying to stick to the past, and the Democrats are taking America to the future, and it's the battle between the future and the past. And in my mind, it's completely the opposite, because it is the left who lives in the past with these Marxist ideas, who have proven themselves unworkable and wrong and dangerous. They still stick to those old ideas that are more than 100 years old, and they're trying to implement them here. But we are the ones who are looking into the future. We are the ones who are the optimists. And when Trump was president, America was humming and buzzing and booming, and there was a lot of work. Businesses were opening. Everybody was making money hand over fist. And then Biden came and all that stopped. And people started losing work. Things became very expensive. Family budgets are suffering. And there is no real good perspective for the common people. It's just the elites who may, like Biden and his staff, may feel optimistic about their delusional ideas being implemented, but that is not going to last long, because all of that will fail if they remain in power to implement those ideas. So we should do everything not so that they wouldn't remain in power, because that would be the end of this country and what it stands for.
You were pointing out how old so many of these ideas are, how they've failed around the world, and that these ideologies, these ideological things like socialism, fascism, communism. And you referenced earlier Hillary Clinton's campaign and whether or not she actually embraced some of those isms, or whether or not they were just a tool for her to get ahead. And which has been my opinion of her, was that, you know, the isms, feminism, all of it is just racism. All of those things are tools that the Democrats use to get themselves in power. But deep down, do you think that they really believe socialism is a better way, or do you think they're just using whatever tools are available to them, I'm speaking of the Democrat Party, to get more power so that they are in full control and enhance their ability to control people, because that's what people with flawed people do. They want to control others, and they want to make themselves rich. They want the power to make their friends rich. Do you see what I'm kind of describing here?
Right. I think that what they have in their heads is what Orwell described as doublethink. It's the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time. And that's what's happening to them. They are holding on to power. They are increasing their bank accounts while at the same time they are talking about the disadvantage, equity, while they themselves couldn't care less. Well, that's how socialism works. It's like if you vote for socialism or you promote it, then kind of you have an indulgence. It's like in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was selling indulgences. If you're a sinner, if you buy that indulgence, your sins will be forgiven. So in the same way, the left operates. If they help socialism to rule in this country, that they win. They get the indulgence. That means that they don't have to work. They don't have to support anybody. They don't have to be charitable. They don't have to give their money to the disadvantaged through charity or directly. The government will do it for them. They've made everything to bring the government into power that functions as this big, gigantic charity. But we all know how the government works. It's like, as Reagan said, like the scariest words in America are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. People who are the majority, they need to be able to be given freedom to take care of themselves, as opposed to giving the government the power to bring them to this kind of happiness. The important part that I didn't at first understand in the Declaration of Independence is that the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I could understand life, liberty. What is the pursuit of happiness coming from socialist dictatorship? I didn't understand. That sounded a little silly. But now I understand the deep philosophical meaning of that, because nobody can make you happy. We all want to be happy, but the government cannot be happy. You cannot delegate the pursuit of happiness to anybody, especially to a government bureaucrat. You can only pursue your own happiness on your own, because only you know what will make you happy. No government bureaucrat will know that. And so we need to keep our freedom to be able to take care of ourselves.
You talk about the double think, and it kind of reminded me of Animal Farm, Orwell's Animal Farm, where Squealer is explaining to the other animals why pigs get to eat milk and apples, the preferred diet. And he's explaining that it's because they have to do all the work and they need to be strong in order to take care of the other animals. It's very similar to, it's almost proverbial the way the Democrat Party has followed it, and the political class in general in this country has sort of followed that same thing. The reason we don't wear masks is because we're looking out for you. Or the Chicago mayor, Lori Lightfoot, when she was caught having her hair done when all hair salons were closed in Chicago during the pandemic, and her saying, well, I'm a public figure. I have to be out there, so therefore my hair has to look right.
So was Nancy Pelosi. Yeah.
So was Nancy Pelosi. As we wind down the hour here, Oleg Atbashian, it's been great to have you on. It's atbashian.com is where you can get his books. And Oleg, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening.
And we're closing out here through the Looking Glass on TNT Radio. Signing off from Washington, D.C., I'm Scott Wheeler.